So Sierra Club Beyond Coal and Building Electrification in Maryland. I have my email down here and I can put it in the chat as well. If you have any follow-up questions or just want to get in touch about volunteering or anything like that. So yeah, this is a map of all of the coal plants that are in Maryland. So there is the ones that are the closest to Baltimore City are the one Wagner and Brandon Shores, which are both in Anne Arundel County, I believe. And there's some in the south. Yeah, there's some in the south and in Charles and Calvert counties, one in like on the border of Frederick and Montgomery, and then Warrior Run in Western Maryland and Allegheny. And all but one of these coal plants have announced retirement dates or have retired, except for Warrior Run and Allegheny in the past couple of years. So that is so far good progress, even though their use is still currently ongoing. They are set to retire before 2030. But overall, coal has taken a steep decline in the state and the U.S. in general. You can look at the maps here of the different energy sources from 1949 up until 2017. And coal is that blue in the top, and starting in around the early 2000s, it's been consistently going down. And then you can see a more like zoomed in version of the map for Maryland on the right. I can also share these slides afterwards if that's helpful. These are made by several different people within the Sierra Club. So yeah, credit goes to them as well. And this is a little visual about how coal burning creates smog pollution, as Ted was talking about earlier. So pollution that comes out of the smokestacks results in just really bad air quality, which interacts with sunlight, creating smog, making it really hard to breathe, and causes really high asthma rates. And as many of you probably know, like Baltimore has disproportionate amount of people who have asthma, especially children and Black children, even more specifically. Yeah, a little bit more about the impact of coal pollution. Most Marylanders, 85%, live in counties that don't meet EPA healthy air standards for smog, and our coal plants are a major source of smog-forming pollution in addition to transportation, and it exacerbates respiratory problems like asthma, which disproportionately impact people that are already disabled or marginalized in a certain way. And of course, all of this is amplified when we are in ongoing pandemic that is a respiratory virus. So yeah, and they're also a toxic, they're also a source of toxic water pollution. I know in the past couple of years, we've worked with groups like Water Keepers to survey like the water around these power plants, and there's a lot of really awful discharge with metals like mercury, arsenic, selenium that can cause just all types of cancer and impairments in people and animals. So there's a lot of negative impacts. So this page is talking about the bill that we tried to introduce last legislative session. So we were trying to get the Maryland Coal Community Transition Act passed, and it was a bill focused on closing and shutting down all of the coal plants in the state by or before 2030, and also have a piece of legislation be geared towards transition for the workers, allocate $40 million to establish new fossil fuel transition, and also just like longer term planning for what this will look like. And unfortunately, it didn't pass. Last minute kind of got shut down. And then the year before with COVID, it kind of just fell through. But it is kind of an inevitability that the coal plants will eventually shut down. So it's a little bit unfortunate that we weren't able to get that transition piece for workers and communities. But we're still hopefully pushing for that and trying to get that approved. And yeah, this is a little bit about the progress up until this point within like nationally, the Sierra Club has helped close over or almost 350 coal plants have retired or announced retirement since 2010. And then, like I mentioned previously, in Maryland, by 2020, or sorry, at the end of 2021, of the 6 active coal plants, 5 of them have either retired or have announced plans to retire. And the Maryland Commission on Climate Change has called the General Assembly to pass coal phase-out legislation that supports impacted workers and communities, which the General Assembly has not done. But it is significant to note that the Commission had stated that. And these are just some examples of where coal transition has been successful in other states. So there's New York, Washington State, Virginia, which is our neighbor or close to us, and Colorado and Hawaii. So all of these have looked a little bit different, but have allocated funds for transition or administrative regulation. New York specifically set the date to end coal burning by 2020. And it's like some of the most progressive coal transition legislation. So those are just some of the examples. Yeah, and we've like simultaneously while working on that, we have been, sorry, there's a lot of police and ambulance noises, so I'm just gonna wait for that to pass.
Sounds like you're in Baltimore.
And I'm downtown, so it's just like constant. But yeah, we've also been working on building electrification and figuring out like alternatives to gas for electrifying our future. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about gas in buildings now and some of the potential renewable alternatives. Yeah, so the new data shows that natural gas has become one of the largest drivers of emissions globally. And this is a pie chart of gas consumption in the US. And you can see about a third of it comes from buildings. That includes like residential homes as well as malls, offices, just things like that. And gas companies connect at least one new house to gas every minute, which is 560,000 gas hookups nationwide, which is a ridiculous amount. And then this is specifically for gas consumption in MD, Maryland. And you can see that a really almost, and again, a third is coming from residential, and then another 25% is coming from commercial. So it takes up a pretty good amount of gas consumption. And the key takeaways from this are that, yeah, Maryland consumes 1% of all gas in the US in its buildings, and electric power and transportation sectors in Maryland, getting my notes a little bit mixed up. Yeah, so sorry, in the building sector, comprised of the residential and commercial sectors, that totals 54.4%, which is a very disproportionate amount compared to other states nearby or just in the country in general. And then, yeah, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about why buildings emissions are harmful to us. And there's a little visual down there for you see the different types of emissions. So indoor and outdoor air, so it can cause burning fossil fuels results in emissions of greenhouse gas and localized air pollution outdoors, but then also the indoor air quality is damaged and pretty much almost entirely unregulated. I think only like 2 states have regulations on indoor air quality. There's like EPA guidelines, but there's not really any type of enforcement. And so this results in a lot of really poor indoor air quality, in addition to outdoor air quality being bad, exacerbating the same issues that we talked about with coal, like health issues like asthma and other respiratory illnesses. And then I'm going to get into the demographics a little bit of who is like particularly more vulnerable to the impacts of gas. So children living in homes with gas stoves are 42% more likely to suffer from symptoms of asthma. And that's really because children are really, really active and have high breathing rates. And so they're just literally inhaling more, and then they're they have a higher lung surface area, that like their lungs are bigger in proportion to their bodies than adults. And then their respiratory and immune systems are not yet fully developed. So they're a lot more susceptible to illnesses from air pollution, which, you know, explains the really high asthma rates of children in Baltimore. And then other communities that are disproportionately impacted are low-income families, because families living in smaller residences tend to have poor ventilation, and also increased pollution burden from gas appliances. And then renters specifically also face added challenges reducing pollution exposure because they're not in control of the source, the power source in their home, and it's just up to their landlords or the owner of the building. Yeah, and here's a little, another visual of like the different ways that, excuse me, gas stoves can be harmful, and the different things that they, the different ways that they can affect your body. And so one is brain toxicity, memory loss, as we said multiple times, asthma, variety of other like respiratory illnesses, heart toxicity, and it can also be really damaging for pregnant people and infants. And some of the particulate matters are like nitrogen oxides and carbon monoxides, formaldehyde as well. And then, also, this is really important to talk about because this month is actually Asthma like Awareness Month. And then there's been early research from 2028 that's shown that long-term exposure to NOx emissions were correlated with a higher risk of death from COVID-19. So all of these things are kind of just like tripled with ongoing pandemic. So yeah, now I'm going to be talking about kind of the alternatives to gas, and so like what can we do instead? And these are just some of the benefits of electrifying our homes and buildings. So right now, residential gas consumption is like 70% space heating and water heating and cooking, and pool and clothes are a little bit less, a lot less. And these pictures here are some examples of what building electrification, like replacement appliances, can look like. So here's a heat pump, space heating and cooling, heat pump water heaters, electric dryers, and electric cooking, and yeah, electric stove tops, which some of which we already have. And then here's a little breakdown on how heat pumps work. So they work by harvesting energy. They extract like heat from the cold outdoors, concentrate it, and then deliver it into your home. And there's different kinds of heat pumps. I know there's like duct and ductless, and I'm not really an expert on heat pumps, but I know people who work in that. So if you wanting to install a heat pump in your home or just curious about that, you can definitely shoot me an email, and I can connect you to folks who are a little bit more, have more expertise regarding heat pumps.